Bug-type Pokemon are bad, and honestly, since the buffs to Snow, this is arguably the worst single typing in the entire game. At least Rock-type Pokemon have a lot of offensive advantages, and the Spadef buff in the Sand is a pretty big deal here. The Bug really gets nothing that actually benefits it, and it's resisted by 7 different typings in the game for absolutely zero reason. So today, let's rework the Bug type and make it actually viable in VGC. If you guys like these types of videos, make sure to get this video to 300 likes, and I can look into maybe either reworking some other types to nerf them or make them better so we can actually see them more used in VGC. Also, make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with other competitive Pokemon videos just like this one. Finally, if you want to go the extra mile, consider clicking my links down below to my other socials, as well as the join button for early access to new videos, as well as some emotes and even a nice badge next to your name. With all that out of the way, let's look into why Bug-type Pokemon are typically really bad. I do want to start off with some positives that this typing does have, and at least outline the areas that Bug could potentially have some upsides for your team. If you're looking for a Pokemon that has good matchups into grass types, psychic types, or dark types, Bug is actually a pretty decent option, and these aren't exactly uncommon types in the format. Grass types have only gotten better since we got the introduction of Rillaboom in Generation 8, and even newer Pokemon like Ogerpon in Generation 9, though there is a bit of an issue with the consistency Bug has against psychic and dark type Pokemon here. A lot of the best psychic and dark types in the format do have very strong secondary typings that unfortunately make them very good into Bug type Pokemon. When we think of good psychic type Pokemon, some of the best options come from Psyspam teams, and this unfortunately means options like Armouge and Hatterene, as well as many other common candidates, have secondary typings that end up making their weakness to Bug a completely neutral option. For dark types, this is arguably even more noticeable, as it's very rare for a pure dark type Pokemon to actually see the light of day in VGC, and a lot of these very good dual type Pokemon just happen to be neutral to Bug, with options such as Kingambit and Chiyu being some of the biggest offenders here. You'll struggle to find even a single Pokemon in most VGC formats that has a single typing of either psychic or dark that makes them actually weak to the Bug typing, so because of this, a lot of these two Pokemon that Bug is supposed to positively match up into unfortunately don't really get affected. When we remember that 7 of the 18 types in the game end up having a resistance to Bug, this unfortunately is a very difficult type to find good offensive matchups with. So okay, Bug doesn't have the best offensive matchups per se, but what about defensively? Now there are some actual reasons to use a Bug type as a defensive option on your team, as some of the best offensive typings such as ground and fighting end up being really resisted, and Bug also has a very strong resistance to grass that makes it really good into common Pokemon like Rillaboom. If you're looking for a Pokemon though that can cheese matchups like Urshifu, going for close combat, or really the entire Rillaboom moveset outside of U-turn and Fake Out, this is a legitimate typing to add to your team. Bug doesn't even have that many weaknesses either, as it only has 3 weaknesses to Flying, Rock, and Fire. And while these are all very good offensive typings here, considering the fact there are typings such as Grass that have a total of 5 weaknesses, this isn't exactly the most unworkable thing to have for a typing. I think at minimum, these are areas that we don't really need to affect too much with our Bug typing improvements, as Bug actually does have some really good defensive properties to it in my opinion. We have even seen Bug types have some legitimate defensive roles in the format, with the best example of this arguably coming from Volcarona, which is a very good defensive Pokemon with Rage Powder. It can also set up with Quiver Dance to become a very strong bulky special wall. And with its dual typing of Fire, this ends up having a total of 6 resistances that make it very powerful defensively. I think if we had more Bug type Pokemon that actually had defensive stat spreads, we could see this being an alright defensive typing. Now that we've outlined the concept of what makes a Bug type Pokemon type matchup wise, how are we going to necessarily fix this typing's offensive attributes? I think the biggest area to start here would be to rework it so that way then not as many types actually hold a resistance to Bug. There's absolutely no reason for this because a lot of Bug type Pokemon unfortunately just are not good anyway, so we're going to start by at least making sure that Poison and Ghost no longer resist Bug. Now this will actually be a pretty big deal because there are a lot of Poison type Pokemon that also hold the Grass typing, and being able to finally hit Pokemon like Venusaur and Vileplume for super effective damage will be a huge deal for Bug types. Meanwhile, for Ghost typing, at the very least, this is one of the best offensive types in the game, so taking at least a resistance that Ghost has away from it will be a really big deal in terms of trying to balance the type chart, because Ghost was arguably a top 5 type offensively, and Bug is the worst typing by far right now. There is a third type here that I want to change the interactions with, but this is going to be a bit more than just making it neutral, as we're going to change Fairy's resistance to Bug and actually make it a weakness. Now this is going to be a pretty big deal because when combined with the loss of Ghost and Poison's resistances, options like Fluttermane end up actually going from having a 4 times resistance to Bug to actually being 2 times weak to it. This will help a lot with giving a lot of good fast Bug type Pokemon a really good matchup into one of the format's best picks overall, as adding another weakness onto a a Pokemon like this will hopefully be a pretty big deal when it comes to type balancing. I think this goes a long way because with Fairy specifically being weak to Bug, this makes a lot of fighting type Pokemon better, which have fallen off a lot in recent generations, as most fighting type Pokemon have the move U-turn, and they also end up being weak to Fairy overall offensively. I think this buff not only helps a lot with the Bug type Pokemon, but it also helps out with a lot of Pokemon that get the move U-turn, specifically a lot of fighting types, which end up not having a great way to actually harm Fairy type Pokemon, but with the move U-turn now being super effective into them, they can actually pivot and no longer need to worry about taking a strong Fairy type move that would otherwise hit them for super effective damage. Unfortunately, this does mean we get an accidental buff to Urshifu with this, but I think it's an unfortunate consequence that we'll just have to kind of accept with this, and it'll help a lot more Pokemon than it will harm by making Urshifu slightly better into the 2 Fairy types that end up being viable. Now, as far as Bug type Pokemon's type chart matchups, this is easily the most influential change that it would have in the format, as Fairy is widely regarded as the single best type in the game offensively and defensively right now, and having another way to actually harm it offensively would be a really big deal, and it might make Bug a lot more potent in the metagame than it currently is. So with these changes to the type chart, can Bug type Pokemon actually perform well in the format? Now, there are some obvious contenders like Volcarona, Araquanid, Vivillon, and Scizor that would easily stand out, but these are not Bug type Pokemon that necessarily needed the buff to be viable per se. There are some Bug types though that would legitimately improve with this, and I think the first one that comes to mind is Lokix, which would actually be a very strong first impression user that could really well revenge off Pokemon like Fluttermane, and it would be a strong revenge killer in the format overall here. Meanwhile, Frostmoth could be a powerful Quiver Dance user that has at least a much more spammable stab now, considering that we have 3 less typings that can resist Bug Buzz here. This would be a very powerful sweeper, I think, especially with the ability Ice Scales helping it a lot defensively speaking. Now, Accelgor, while it isn't in Scarlet and Violet, would actually be a very improved Pokemon with these buffs, as it's a strong Pokemon to partner with options like Tapu Lele that otherwise would be able to prop the Psychic Seed for it, making it into a very strong Unburdened sweeper. Now has to worry about less Pokemon actually resisting the stab. Unsure if other Bug type Pokemon would actually stand out in VGC, but that's mostly due to another issue that a lot of Bug type Pokemon unfortunately are plagued with. One of the other issues that Bug has is unfortunately its very low overall stat spread. Considering Bug is the weakest stat on average for fully evolved Pokemon in every single stat besides physical defense, Bug is objectively going to be at a huge disadvantage when it comes to the stat totals for these Pokemon. Considering a lot of the best Pokemon in VGC have an average of 538 BST or higher, it's very hard for Bug Pokemon to compete when the average fully evolved Bug type Pokemon has a base stat total of 467. This is nearly a 70-point handicap that the typing has, and it already has a lot of burdens that it needs to carry. I think a big part of this is just the fact that a lot of Bug type Pokemon are unfortunately kept to the early routes. If you want to see just how much this matters in action though, outside of Arceus Bug, which is just another form of Arceus, the highest Bug type stat totals end up reaching only 600 BST, which is a very easy stat mark for a lot of Pokemon to just break. 3 of these 4 Pokemon that actually reach 600 BST though are all Mega Evolutions, and the 4th Pokemon is Genesect, which has only been legal in VGC Series 13 and 14, which allowed Mythicals, and it was never actually legal in any in-person tournaments. Our Bug type Pokemon that's actually legal in VGC though with the highest base stat total is Slitherwing, with a stat total of 570 BST. Even Rock typing, which is the only other typing without a box art legendary, has at least Tyranitar to be in that 600 plus BST market here. This is genuinely always going to hold Bug type Pokemon back in competitive, and while there are some viable Bug type Pokemon with very low base stat totals that have existed over the years, it is always going to be an uphill battle to avoid having these Bug type Pokemon get squashed by opponents. I genuinely think with some higher base stat totals, there could be a lot of Pokemon that could break 500 BST and become very viable here. We've seen options like Scizor and Accelgor, for example, that hit right around that 500 mark that end up being very powerful niche options for certain archetypes. And Volcarona is one of the few Pokemon that completely passes this 500 marker, and it's a strong threat even in Regulation G, as it's one of the best checks to Calyrex Ice Rider, which a lot of people consider to be one of the strongest restricteds in that format. But another issue that Bug has compared to a lot of other typings is the moveset choice. Now, Bug has a lot of good utility with moves like U-turn, as well as some status options like Rage Powder. There are very few Bug type attacking moves that the type actually relies on that deal some real damage. Now, Bug Buzz and First Impression are some okay options for sure, but really only Volcarona and Frostmoth actually use Bug Buzz in the first place, and First Impression is extremely easy to play around due to the move Protect existing. One of the coolest buffs to Bug types that's happened over the modern generations was to the move Leech Life, which used to only have 20 base power, and it now deals a base damage of 80, which is a huge deal for any physical Bug type Pokemon, though unfortunately really only a Rakwanid actually uses the move these days. If we gave this move to more physical threats like Scizor and Kleavor for example, we could legitimately see this become a viable bug type stab for some otherwise kinda okay bug type Pokemon. I think the greater issue here though is a lack of a strong special bug type move, as the best option for this is Pollen Puff, though it's currently only legal on Vivian, Ribombee, Vespiquen, and Leavanny, and most of these Pokemon are very bad, with Vivian being the only viable option. Seeing this move eventually make its way into Pokemon like a Celgar, Yanmega, and Vikavolt would potentially be a very huge deal for the viability, as it would give them both a really strong offensive move at base 90, which is better than Bug Buzz, but also a way to deal some actual utility for their team. I think if we started to distribute Pollen Puff more, we would have to avoid Pokemon like Volcarona or Frostmoth, as especially in Volcarona's case, this would become a very overbearing Pokemon that would be extremely brainless to use. As a Quiver Dance Pokemon with 135 special attack that can very well deal some strong damage to a lot of types that Bug ends up being resisted by, would be very harmful for the state of the metagame. Now another solution for the special attacking bug type Pokemon could just be to add a new move altogether, as outside of Megahorn, no bug type move even breaks the base 90 damage mark, though at the same time, I'm not really sure what this move would be or how we would manage it. Though frankly, even a special Megahorn clone is a real start here. Overall though, I think we have moves that already exist for Bug that could be very powerful. We just need to be a lot less afraid to distribute them to Pokemon of the Bug typing, since most of these Pokemon would be at best niche options even with some of these broken moves. Tandem with some better stat Pokemon though, and a really improved type chart thanks to these new type reworkings, I could see Bug legitimately become viable one day in VGC. Now, if you guys enjoyed the video and you want to see more content like this, of course, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, as I upload content like this every week. Also, if you want to go a step further, consider becoming a member, as people like Josh aka Ultra Player, Zeke Zero, and Blood Lily have all been members, and their support goes a long way in funding the content here. You'll get some extra badges, early access to videos, and some emotes as well to use. It's a great way to show that you guys really care about the content here, though even just subscribing and liking the video is a huge help. If you guys also want to check out the links down below, we have links to both of our editors, Doses and Becca, who do an amazing job with putting out content for you guys, as well as other ways to interact with me, such as my Twitter, Blue Sky, and Discord, all of which are going to be down below. With that said, I'll see you guys in our next upload. Until then, peace out, guys.